everybody, welcome to the Games Tavern Happy Hour. I'm Mac, and this week I'm joined by Rob. Oh, wait, hang on, that's not working. Why is that? Say something again? I am not picking you up. Can't hear Rob. Try it. I think that's me still. What the higgity hey is happening here? Sorry, one second. I don't know why that's... We test things. I'm sure about it, guys. Properties.
Yeah, it's totally working.
Oh, they got you now. Nope, gone again. What the hell? I hate technology. All right, try again.
All right, hopefully you can hear me.
Huh? Yeah, it looks like it should be good. These are the same settings when it couldn't hear you, so
Yep.
whatever. Well, okay, let's try again. Welcome, everybody. I'm Mac. That's Rob. We're doing Games Tavern Happy Hour tonight. Yay. Before we get going, guys, we wanted to do a big shout out to Tabletop Audio. If you listen to the opening intro segment there, that's some of their music. We support them on the channel. They do a lot of really great stuff. It's all free. If so, you can go on and pull it up for any of the games you're running at your home or running on our Discord. Anything that you guys want to get up there and do, you want to just add a little ambience to your games, make it happen using Tabletop Audio. It's a good time. What else? Well, let's go ahead and get in, and we'll just figure out the rest of that later, because I can't remember. So, the new stuff. It's a lot of really good stuff happening this week. For anybody who wasn't paying attention, it was Gen Con online this week, wasn't it, Rob?
Yes, it was, and it was a busy and also somewhat awkward Gen Con online because some people are not familiar with streaming.
They're not professionals like us, Rob.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had mic problems and all sorts of issues.
So weird.
Yeah. No, this is hard. But they got to figure it out. And there's a lot of stuff. I haven't had a chance to dig through a tenth of it. There is so much stuff that came out on Gen Con. So we're only going to touch on a little bit of it here. And then a lot of stuff also didn't come out on Gen Con at all, just announced. Like my favorite piece of news for the entire day, I'm going to give this and then I'm just going to go to sleep and let Rob do the news, is there's a new Blood Bowl edition was announced for coming out in holiday 2020. For anybody out there who has not played Blood Bowl, you are missing out hardcore. It is basically fantasy football, but better. It's football in a fantasy world. I love it. It's absolutely fantastic, and it is a ridiculous game.
I will say this. Blood Bowl is my absolute favorite form of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, and I guess technically 40k now. Because it distills what's fun about those games down to a set of rules in a playing field that everyone who is American anyway should be relatively familiar with.
Yeah.
And it's fast.
It is
for
very fast.
Tabletop wargaming.
It's one of my favorite games simply because it's fun, it's wacky, it's simple, and it doesn't worry about trying to be uber balanced. Why has this not been discussed before? Because the news happened yesterday. But yeah, Blood Bowl is it is football as seen through the British lens, American football as seen through the British lens. And you have orcs fighting humans in the starter set for years now has been that. This is going to be the same thing, but everybody's going to have new sculpts, it looks like. And like I said, it's coming out in the holiday.
Now, when you say orcs, do you really mean greenskins?
I do.
Yes.
Because
this is important Warhammer lore for all of you to understand. The greenskins are somewhat different from the orcs, especially the orcs of 40k.
Yeah, this is orcs with a C, ORCS. The team itself looks like it is the orc team, but in this game you can have orcs, goblins, and trolls on the orc team. So yes, it is the orc team, but there's a bunch of greenskins on it. It's gonna be a good time. Yeah, you can't see it, but I am a competitive and award-winning Blood Bowl player at Blood Bowl tournaments every year at Nova Open. I play the Goblin team. My award is always the smeared across the pitch with the most gusto. So I'm not a competitive player. I'm not good at the game. I'm good at getting torn in half, and it's fantastic, and I love it. It's that kind of a game where you can lose that bad and still have a good time. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the link to the Warhammer community site announcing it, just so anybody out there who's so inclined can check it out. And we can move on. If you guys have any questions about Blood Bowl or any of this news that we're going over, shout it off in the chat, and we can get going with that. We'll be more than happy to loop back around.
Let's talk about D&D Beyond, that announcement, the 3-year anniversary, where all the subscribers are getting a new digital dice set. That's nice, especially considering the pricing scheme on those digital dice. The thank you to the people that have been participating in that D&D Beyond program, that paid program with subscriptions for a while now. That's big.
Yeah, well, we were talking about this in the Tavern a couple days ago. I think right before WMD, where our feelings are kind of mixed on the digital dice idea. Conceptually, it's really cool, and if you really, really like the idea of this set of digital dice, I could see throwing out a couple bucks for a novelty set. That seems cool.
When Mac and I discussed this, and it was almost a week ago now, my feeling is always, I understand that a lot of the value of these products is in the written content itself and not so much the packaging.
Yeah.
Like the idea that dice are different in that you're just paying for the product is of course wrong, because what you're really paying for with dice is the amount of effort that goes into resin casting dice correctly so that they don't
so they're fair.
Roll wrong.
Yeah.
So the idea of paying for digital dice doesn't bother me. The idea of paying the same price for digital dice as I would for an actual set of dice that I can lick
have forever
or roll for forever, because we all know that dice wander off.
I usually just throw mine out a window. Stupid dice. I look
at it the same way as I look at like books. I don't mind paying a lot of money for a digital book, because I understand that there's value in writing the book.
Yeah.
You know, if I pay $7 for a digital book, I'm going to look at the physical book and say I'll pay $10 for that. But if they're like, it's $10 for both, I'm like, but why?
And there is something to be said about having the ability to have, to do it online and roll with it. And I'm going to try a new feature here. I'm basically going to try and pull up my my DM character that I have for when I'm rolling DMs on the Games Tavern one-shots, and roll some dice for you. So here we go. There's my Dungeon Master. And as you can see, you go over here, you pick let's just roll 3d20, why not? You roll them, and they come out as little healing potion bottles. Like, how cool is that? They're all animated, and I don't know if you could hear the noise, but it sounds like you're sloshing around potion bottles. And then they disappear and make more bubbly noises.
Again, the art is real, and I totally understand paying money for it. I struggle with paying the same amount of money for that as I would.
Yeah. I'd pay $5 for that. I'd maybe even pay $10 for that, or consider doing if I wasn't already subscribed, that might be the thing to get me over the hump and get a subscription. Right. I like that idea. The noise did come through. Fantastic. I love it. So those are a lot of fun. Those are now my standard dice for D&D Beyond.
Now that we've gotten that out of our systems, there are actually some quality of life improvements in D&D Beyond.
There are.
New critical hit damage update, which is great. I need to be clear, like the little things that make it so much easier to just actually, I'm going to roll for my weapon, and oh hey, it hit with a critical hit. It's nice to know that stuff without having to actually know that stuff, especially when you're playing with new people.
Yeah, I'm starting that Learn to Play campaign. We just did our session 0 last night. Starting that on the Games Tavern, and being able to use that as a way to sort of have everybody check, making sure that they're doing the right thing, having it automatically go, hey, you did a critical, your damage is now coming in blue to indicate something has changed. I'm really looking forward to using that as a learning opportunity and helping to describe that.
So, once again, looking through Mac's notes here, I'm going to steal this one from you, Mac, because I 100% agree with you. Mac's feeling is that we're moving closer and closer to a virtual tabletop on D&D Beyond, and I think that is the long-term plan, and I think it is a very good plan, Wizards. Please follow through.
We know you watch our stream. That's
who knows?
That is a comment coming off of promised updates to the combat tracker, which I don't believe you can actually access an active combat tracker if you don't have a subscription. If you do have it, it allows you to basically start planning encounters and actually track it with like an RP or a initiative tracker and do a bunch of other stuff on there, which feels like, okay, now we're 2 or 3 steps away from just rolling it all in together and being able to have a full virtual tabletop map and move tokens around. I'm hoping we get there by the end of the year.
Maps are the hardest part, and I mean, if you play in person, if you play on a virtual tabletop, if you play Theater of the Mind, maps are the hardest part. They're the hardest part. We get it. It's a lot of work to get there, but I think it's going to be worth it in the end. So the final update, the Player Tools app, your mobile app, to help you play D&D with your friends. Is updating with the new equipment, right?
It is, yeah. Now that you can add and attune your equipment, it gives you a little bit more information when you click on them. So it is getting more and more useful. I still have some complaints about it. Like as a wizard, it doesn't let you prep your spells.
Read your spells?
Yeah. No, you can read your spells. You just can't change out the spells that you have.
Oh, okay.
Which for some wizards, that's probably okay. Who cares? You know, they have their standard list of spells, and that's always what they use. But some wizards like to shake things up, and you can't.
So what you're telling me is that it's perfect for sorcerers.
It actually really could be. I've only looked at it on my Adger and Firebeard one, level 1 wizards. Nah, they're not wizards. They're wizlings or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, so I've only looked at it on as Adger and Firebeard for who are running on Whiskey Magic Instruction. But if you could check them out as your wizard character, Robs or Roth or whatever you call them, I think that will Rafe. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah, Rafe.
If you check that out, let us know what you think. I'm very interested in seeing how it works for other classes. But as is, it is getting much, much better. And every week we get pretty big, chunky upgrades up to it. So I'm confident by, within a month it'll probably be fully functional.
I'm very excited about all of the quality of life improvements going on with D&D Beyond. Seriously, don't take my monotone as me joking about this. I very, very much appreciate the amount of work that's being put in on it.
Yeah, it is definitely. They actually described it in the dev update today or this week when they were talking about the anniversary, that this has been a labor of love. They've been listening to the community. They know what people want to do. Building the player apps tool, or the player tool app in the phone, came out of, hey, we know that people want to not just check the rule books, they want to actually be able to use or check their player sheet, but they recognize they'd rather drop that out now and then slowly, incrementally upgrade it, as opposed to just kind of trying to fit it in. So I'm glad that they're listening to the player base and getting that going. So before we get off D&D Beyond, just to loop back on the dice, I noticed we didn't mention this. They are, if you have a subscription or you get a subscription anytime in the month of August, you're going to get those really cool potion dice for free. So think about it. And then you can also share all your source books with all your friends when you join their campaigns, or if you host campaigns. So I think that pretty much covers D&D Beyond. If there's something that we missed, please let us know. We're more than happy to talk, again, loop back. Or if there's something that you have any questions about for the dev update for D&D Beyond, let us know in the chat. So the next one I think is going to be more up your alley. Why don't you take point?
Right. So looping back to Gen Con is the source of all good and bad news in RPGs. Gen Con has delivered to us great news.
Oh, yeah.
Legend of the Five Rings, which is the Act Like a Samurai RPG, I suppose is the easiest way to describe it.
Absolutely.
We'll be getting at least 2 new books this year, which is amazing news because previously there was a lot of uncertainty about whether those books would get finished, whether those books would ever actually get published and actually printed out, and then whether they would actually be delivered to the United States. All of the uncertainty surrounding these products because of the transition from paid staff doing RPG development at Fantasy Flight Games to a paid developer managing freelancers doing RPG development at Fantasy Flight Games.
Yeah, I could see that being a difficult transition that would put a lot of worry into the community. I'm glad that they're moving forward, though.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Again, this is great news, and I personally am going to take this as a sign that we could be getting new Star Wars books eventually, which is just fantastic news because I love that system to death.
Well, focusing on Legend of the Five Rings, though, because that's what this story's about.
Yep.
Is you have played it, and you're talking. We were talking about it a little bit as sort of, the ultimate be a samurai RPG.
Well, I need to be clear. It's
Okay.
not be a samurai, because this is not Imperial Japan. This is a Japan-like setting called Rokugan, where there is an imperial court and everything looks very much like high Imperial Japan, except all of the things that are mythological in the history of Japan are sort of real in Rokugan, down to they're actually fighting demons.
Oh, okay.
So
Well, it feels like a very comfortable analog to what standard fantasy is to medieval Europe. This is to samurai era Japan.
in the grand tradition of Oriental supplements, Legends of the Five Rings is probably one of the least offensive takes on it.
Yeah.
It does well. There's a real, especially now, the fifth edition is fantastic. There's a real grasp of the cultural mores that drive the imperial court behavior, and they sort of loosened up on we're trying very hard to present something that looks like an American's misunderestimation of Imperial Japan, and do the research and actually figure out, would this be a real thing? And if it wasn't a real thing, do we lean into the fact that it's fantasy? And they do very much now lean into the fact that there's real fantasy involved here.
Excellent. So it's not just Tom Cruise running around and being the last samurai. It's actual somebody cares about the source material and knows what they're talking about. So,
Yes.
talking a little bit about these books, there's two of them. There's the Field of Victory and the Blood of the Lioness. The press report that I linked there in the chat for everybody goes into them a little bit more in depth. But the first one, the Fields of Victory, is sort of the source book that has a lot of the rules and history and supplemental rules for the Lion Clan. What's your clan, by the way? If do you have one?
So one of the fun things about L5R is that most players tend to play a certain clan because the clans have particular play styles.
Yeah.
I am a Dragonfly clan player, which means that I am ultra rare. Dragonfly are a split branch of the Crane that have a very strong Shugenja, which means mage in the Rokugan setting tradition. Basically, they're all mages or Yojimbo bodyguards.
Okay.
Mages have Yojimbo in the game. That's very, very Japanese, but also very important thing for the game because there's a lot of physical combat, and
That makes
mages are
sense.
bad at physical combat.
So this is going to be focusing on the Lion Clan. I'm assuming you're familiar with them. It feels like they're kind of at least a big-ish deal. Like people know who they are.
So it's hard to say that any of the clans is more warrior than the others, but Lion claims to be more warrior than the other clans.
Okay.
So that's their scene setter.
So I'm excited to see how they're going to flesh that out with more rules and going into like their battle history and character options and stuff to actually make the most warrior of the characters you can. Thing I'm interested in is they're introducing the Badger Clan, and who doesn't love badgers? That'll be fun.
Pretty much nobody.
Yeah, everybody loves badgers. I'm hoping they're like British badgers though, not American wolverines, because I'd rather have my ass kicked by one of those like fluffy,
American Wolverines or Scandinavian Wolverines.
Ooh, yeah, that's a problem. So that's that's the Field of Victory. Also includes more schools, but I don't know what that means, so I didn't write anything
So
else about
schools are kind of like your character class.
that. Oh, okay, that makes sense.
It's not a 1-to-1, but it's close.
Okay, so that's going to be interesting. We might actually, I might try and actually pick this game up and learn a little bit about L5R because it's a big deal, or at least it's a big part of the cultural zeitgeist of RPGs. The other book, The Blood of the Lioness, is, I guess, their adventure path. It's not unlike The Curse of Strahd or Tales from the Tales from the Yawning Portal.
So the big difference, and one of the reasons that L5R is such a big zeitgeist in RPGs and also card games, although I don't know what the card game situation is. I think they stopped publishing it.
I still see them on the shelf.
Is there's a meta plot, and the Blood of the Lioness advances that meta plot.
That's really cool.
There is a canon ending to the adventure, but of course, your characters, your players can succeed or fail on their own merits because that's how the game works.
Yeah. Well, awesome. That sounds like it's going to be a really cool time. You have to, once we get our hands on this, you're going to have to run us through something on the stream, I think.
Well, L5R is a lot of work. There's a lot of prep, and there's a lot of. It's an old school style game where system mastery does matter.
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, if anybody out there is interested in L5R, Legend of the Five Rings, the 2 books, Field of Victory, and Blood of the Lioness, are saying that they're going to be dropping sometime in early 2021. But I expect we're going to be getting a lot more information about them as this year winds up. And we just hear a whole bunch of cool stuff coming out about the Badger clan and the history of the Lion clan. So stay tuned on that, guys. And again, let us know if you have any questions. So now moving into the actual Gen Con stuff, into the Gen Con announcements themselves, Paizo is knocking it out of the park. We're going to leave that first one up there to the end because it ties in nicely to some other ones we're seeing. But they have announced a new beginner box for Pathfinder.
Stop, Mac. I can't let you do this. I need you to go ahead and skip ahead to the next one.
With the Pathfinder Goblin life-size replica?
Yes, sir,
Yeah,
that one.
I'm very excited about that.
So what Mac is very excited about, so excited that he doesn't even want to talk about it really, is that they've announced that they are producing a 3-foot tall, which is life-size for Pathfinder Goblins, Pathfinder Goblin, which are sort of famous or infamous in the RPG community because they have a very unique
art style,
characterization, art style. Yeah.
They're much more like the Kobold Ate My Baby kobolds, where they're basically a biological bear trap and everything that keeps it going, but just the bear trap is the important part in their mouth. Their jaws unhinge 180 degrees, and they're ridiculous monsters, and I love them. And that's coming out, they were saying, in November. It's being made by WizKids, which are the same people who make a lot of stuff out there. But if you're familiar with, for Dungeons & Dragons, they made a Beholder that was about the size of a basketball, I believe, a Mind Flayer, and a Dragon that were wall-mounted plaques. I actually had a Mind Flayer one for a while, and it was very high quality. I think it was about $400 also. But but they're beautiful things, and I ended up having to get rid of it because it just didn't have a place in my 4 square foot apartment.
Who really has a place for a basketball-sized beholder in their house?
Well, I have this empty space right here.
If I find one, I'll make sure to send it your way. Circling back, what Mac was trying to talk about, even though we all knew that he wanted to talk about the Goblin. October, new beginner box for Pathfinder. This is a pretty big deal. Pathfinder continues to be one of the most popular properties in tabletop RPGs.
Yeah, I think it's probably a firm second to Dungeons & Dragons.
If it's not second, it's very close to second.
Yeah. This is a huge deal because we all know the success of the starter box for 5th edition. It's important to have an accessible, low price point piece that has everything you need in the box to get playing. Just because if you're a new for them, I believe a new GM, but if you're new to running or playing games, having something to hold your hand to get you on a fun adventure is key. You don't want to have to try and figure out a whole bunch of stuff just to get dice rolling, because that turns people off to the game.
Yes, the easier you can make it for people to enter into the game, the actual game, the game where they're going to have fun rolling dice and getting into a character, the more likely they are to stick with the hobby.
Yeah, so I'm very big fan of anything that's going to be anything that's going to be letting people get into whatever it is the game, whatever game you want to play, whether it's Pathfinder, whether it's Warhammer, whether it's Starfinder, Dungeons & Dragons, chess. I don't care. Something that lets new players into the game at a low point of entry makes it exciting for everyone to be able to play, because you need new things, or you need new players. Otherwise, your hobby's going to die. So this is coming out in at $40, $39.99. So that's a bunch of friends can get together, pool their money, and have a couple days or a couple weeks of adventuring, depending on how often they play. And that's coming out in October 2020, or I guess that's this October. So keep an eye out for it. If you're interested in learning how to play Pathfinder, you could probably do a lot worse than picking up the starter box, or the beginner box is what they're calling it.
So I heard you mention one of your favorite games, Mac, Starfinder. Exciting news for Starfinder fans, correct?
Yeah, there is quite a bit of exciting news for Starfinder coming out here, and it's actually dropped today. I didn't even notice it was happening until I just one of my home pages that I have on my computer is just a random news site, and it said that Paizo has teamed up with Amazon to release an audio game. I had no idea what that meant, so
We could actually hear Max squealing. It's a little strange.
I didn't start doing that until I actually read who was on the audio game. So it's set in the Starfinder setting, which is the Pathfinder setting, some untold thousands of years in the future. It does take place on Absalom Station, which is where the Starfinder planet is supposed to have been. It disappeared for some reason. Who cares? Doesn't matter, because Nathan Fillion is voicing a character for this, and Laura Bailey also. Apparently, Laura Bailey's a big deal. Was in The Last of Us, I believe.
Laura Bailey is a big deal because Laura Bailey is on Critical Role.
Oh.
So. Also, she's voiced pretty much every character in anime from 1987 to like 1998.
See, this is why I need to get out more and actually figure things out. I hang out just, I turn the lights off and just hang out here staring at my bookshelf until the next stream comes on. So my life is exciting.
She is arguably a bigger deal than Nathan Fillion, depending on who you ask. I am a big Nathan Fillion fan. I think he's fantastic in everything, literally everything he does. So they're about the same for me.
Excellent. I'm very excited to see what's going on with this. So it's available for free on your Alexa device. If you have an Amazon Alexa device, you can make it happen. I have not yet tried it out on my TV right there because it's a smart TV. Apparently, you can do Alexa stuff on that. But I'm going to give it a go, see what that is. There's not a whole lot of information out there on it, unfortunately. It's just check it out. I think it's ask your Alexa, say, hey Alexa, boot up the Starfinder game, and then it goes. So cool. I'm very, very excited to see where they're going to go with this. There's 3 episodes that are available today, and then there's going to be 3 more episodes that are going to come out in late September, early October. So it should be cool.
I'm excited, not because I'm a huge Starfinder fan, and not necessarily because I'm a huge Nathan Fillion fan or Laura Bailey fan. I'm excited because this means that Amazon is actually putting money behind trying new ways of doing storytelling, which to me is good. We need to try new ways.
Yeah, because if we stop at the standard video game, or we stop at RPGs as we know them, or we stop at weird hybrids of that, we're not going to innovate. And innovation is a huge deal for fancy things like this, because you're not, as we'll get into in the second half, if you keep things the same, you're not going to get cool stuff out of it.
So I want to circle back around to the beginning now, because you're very excited about this for really good reason, and I think everybody should be excited about this. But Paizo announced a long-term strategic partnership with Beetle and Grimm's, which
it's a huge deal.
Why don't you explain why this is a huge deal, Mac?
So we all know, or we should hopefully all know, what Beetle and Grimm's is. It is a bespoke curio luxury gaming aids company. They have made they're taking pre-orders right now, I believe, for a Curse of Strahd Curse of Strahd other thing, which we'll get to later. But they are also taking pre-orders for Icewind Dale. They make very big boxes that have a whole bunch of fancy miniatures and cool playing aids, handouts for all your players, tokens, maps, miniatures. They're fantastic. They are a little on the pricey side, but they're worth it.
It lets you keep your RPG stuff on your coffee table.
Yeah, it is. If you have the kind of space that's going to be a dedicated RPG space, you have a dedicated game room, or you decorate your house with skeletons, owlbears, and woodcuts of other skeletons. This is the kind of thing that you might want to be looking at. What they are doing with Pathfinder is they're making character journals. They're calling them complete character chronicles. The idea being that you can start from your backstory get your level 1 character written up. I haven't seen the insides of these yet, but I'm assuming that they're going to have a little bit of 1 or 2 pages for talking about your pre-adventure stuff, and then you just fill it with your character's adventures until they die. It's really cool.
You're a Pathfinder player. I've only ever played Pathfinder passingly. I'm
Okay.
not. The character chronicles, those are sort of like Life Pass.
Kind of, yeah. It's much like D&D. There's a lot of sort of on the path of your character's progression, for even if you're single classing, there's a lot of options that you have to pick that will take you down one path or another.
Okay. Yeah. Hearing about this kind of product, knowing the kind of work that Beetle and Grimm's puts into their products, makes me kind of wish that Wizards had announced this for 5th edition. I'm just saying.
Well, I believe Wizards somewhat recently did announce some or release some kind of character journals, but I don't believe that they're Beetle and Grimm's quality. One of the things that I'm really excited about with this is they are class specific. So they have on the website, they have pictures of the Fighter's Chronicle, the Rogue's Chronicle, and the Wizard's Chronicle. Okay, that's very cool. They don't tell us anything about the insides yet, but for the product quality we've seen from Beetle and Grimm in the past, I'm very, very excited to see what they're going to do with this.
So,
yeah.
Having talked about that, the Paizo strategic partnership, which again I think is great, and it's probably going to help out both companies quite a bit. What really got you and a lot of other people wound up was Beetle and Grimm's announcing that they're doing the so posh, so perfect, so beautiful version of Curse of Strahd.
Yeah. So if you watched or were on the show last week, you know that we talked about the Curse of Strahd revamped, which is sort of a $100 package that we'll get to it. We'll get to it. It's a $100 package that includes some extra goodies that you would want to be able to use around your gaming table.
Yep.
And that's being put out, I believe, straight up by Wizards of the Coast.
Yes.
Beetle and Grimm a couple days ago announced that they are going to also be doing their own version of the Curse of Strahd, and it's going to be a little bit more expensive. I believe that they're saying it's going to be coming in at, I want to say, $400. It is not it's not an impulse buy, but what you're getting with it is Beetle and Grimm quality. It's everything that you want. It has the really, really fancy maps. It has a whole map for the Castle Ravenloft, which is apparently been a very difficult map to actually find at map scale to be able to drop on the table.
Maps, again, so huge, so important, and the fact that Beetle and Grimm's is going to give us so many of them kind of makes me think it might be worth the money.
I'm tempted. Between the two of them, I'm really tempted. But it also has a bespoke Dungeon Master screen. It has a map of Barovia on a really thick canvas. Although they're saying it's on human skin, but I don't think the FDA would allow that. So who knows?
I mean, if it's properly tanned, I don't know why not.
That's fair. They have a whole bunch of encounter cards, random handouts that you can give to your readers or your players. They call it jewelry, but they're like tokens and coins and table candy that you can fiddle around with. And thank you, Mr. Smithwick. Finger puppets. They're coming out with finger puppets. Because this is I know that we have a lot of Curse of Strahd players on the that watch the stream. I'm not going to link a picture to the adorable finger puppets because I don't know where you are, and these look like there's spoilers in there. But there is an adorable tiny. It's like picture the Count from Sesame Street, but as an actual vampire with blood smeared across his face and an adorable grin and a nice red cape. Oh, he's just so cute. Strahd is adorable.
One ruins childhood.
It's gonna be really cool. So they only have the concept art on that. If you're looking at running Curse of Strahd, check out that link. If you aren't and you are a player in Curse of Strahd, send that link to your DM.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
On
Yes.
similar
Looks
news,
amazing. Looks amazing.
Aw.
Looks amazing. Cannot be stated enough. Just click on the link and take a look at it just to see what gaming can look like.
Yeah, it is. I have a friend up in New Jersey who games with the. He's a history professor who specializes. He has like a master's degree in the armies of Vlad the Impaler. The man is arguably one of the. If I would actually say he is the American expert on Vlad Tepes. He games with another university professor who runs or who's a professor of Greco-Roman art and mythology and European general mythology. His gaming room, the professor of mythology's gaming room, is in his basement, and it has an entire city that is full of Dwarven Forge stuff. And it's probably more Dwarven Forge value than I have for my entire condo. Like, he says a mortgage on that stuff. If you have that kind of gaming room, this is the kind of RPG gaming you need.
Yep.
If, however, you want to run a really fancy Curse of Strahd game on a slightly different budget,
But I do.
you do, then you want to check out the Curse of Strahd revamped from last week. We talked about it a little bit. We can go over it a little bit more just to, chat about it. But it's again, you're going to get the books or the game. The Curse of Strahd book is split out over 3 different books. Basically, they have a monster manual, and they have the monster manual, and they have the actual adventure path itself. And then they have a couple other things that are in there, a cool Taraka deck, and some maps and a DM screen. That normally is going to be running at $100 or $99.99, I think is what they're calling it at.
Which is a pretty reasonable price to get a whole bunch of stuff that you'll probably use over and over again, even if you don't run Strahd over and over again.
If I knew if I was getting prepped to run a Strahd campaign in my condo, and like, hey, I'm going to invite a whole bunch of friends over, I would 100% buy that. That is cool. As is, I don't know if I'm going to do that, so I was on the fence. News has come up, and I don't know why they did this, and I'm sorry for the giant link here, guys, but for some reason, right now, the pre-order is on sale for $65. That makes it $15 more than the hardback Curse of Strahd book. That's kind of a no-brainer at this point. Like, you won't get it immediately. It still doesn't come out until October 20, I believe. But yeah, if you were on the fence for picking that up, check out the link. Go ahead and put the pre-order in now, and Amazon guarantees you will pay $65. So
a little Amazon link literacy lesson for Mac.
Yes.
So if you look at the link, it is Amazon.com. That is the name of the product. Then there's the /DP, which is direct product, and then there's the stocking number.
Mm-hmm. I can stop at the stocking number.
Yeah, if you use that link where it just ends at the stocking number, it will actually link through. All it's doing is tearing out all of the referential information that Amazon's looking for to track your internet movement.
Well then.
So.
Okay, that's embarrassing. But yeah,
online marketplaces, lots of fun.
I don't understand technology.
It's okay.
Yeah, check that out if you are interested in the Curse of Strahd, especially if you're interested in the limited editions or the sort of collector's editions stuff. That's a really good deal. It's a great way to get in on you sort of get a discounted price for my first limited edition. I like the idea. I have the Curse of Strahd somewhere back here. Yeah.
I personally don't believe that $65 sale is going to last all that long. I have a feeling that there was more production than there is current demand, and I don't think that disparity is going to remain in place for much longer. So,
So if you're interested, you got to lock that price in now.
Yep.
So anything? I think that pretty much covers most of the news we were looking at. We're coming up rapidly on 7:45.
Let's be honest. You and I are people that have to work, which sucks. Which means that we did not spend 2 full weeks watching every Gen Con
Yeah.
Zoom meeting, every stream. So we missed announcements, which means that there's something that somebody cares about that we're not going to talk about. So sorry about that.
Mea culpa. We will definitely try to cover more Gen Con stuff as the month of August rolls on.
Yep.
By then it'll be a little old, unfortunately, but we'll try and get you as much as we can next week and the week after, just because
it's still news.
Yeah, it's still news. It's still really exciting stuff. Gen Con is a big deal, and we want to bring you the steaming hot gaming news straight to your face. No, we're not going to throw that. I'm sorry about that. That was not the greatest.
I mean, yeah. Just no.
All right.
Anyway,
let's take a quick
break. So we can recover from that.
Yeah, I need to grab some water. All right. Let's see. Nope. Here we go. Break. All right. We'll be back in a second, guys. Transitioning. Hey, everybody. Well, wait, nope. There we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. And, of course, we seem to have lost Rob again.
No!
Oh, no, he's back. Okay, cool.
Yay!
Yay! Computers are easy, right? Yeah, magical. So, the second half... Actually, I think we had a question, didn't we? Just because, why the hell not? Somebody said something. Yeah, it's gone now.
The question was, what is Mac's favorite RPG?
Oh, DCC. Yeah, Dungeon Crawl Classics. But specifically, it actually really does matter on what kind of thing I want to play, what kind of mood I'm in, where we're going. But if I have
That's
to
very
pick one,
strange.
if I have to pick one game that I'm going to have on my desert island for me to play with Wilson and the Coconuts, it's going to be DCC. So, what are we talking about for the second half here?
Foundational fantasy tropes, bro. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's what we had you talking on last time. Last time we were speaking about Beowulf and Norse sagas and all sorts of great old literature that sort of laid the bedrock foundations of fantasy.
Modern European mythology, really.
Yeah, and today's subject actually builds on a lot of that. But before we get too specific into this, a question out to the chat. Feel free to throw it in. What are some of the core foundational... Well, they wouldn't be... Yeah, we'll go with tropes. The core foundational tropes of a high fantasy world. Who lives in this world? What's
They
happening?
are tropes. They're tropes. They're memes.
Yeah.
They're archetypes, I guess. Yeah, there you go. Halfling rogue.
Halfling rogue. Yeah, no, that fits. That fits. Wizard in robes, yes. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that fits into it. And if you look at the fantasy worlds of Dungeons and Dragons versus the fantasy world of Pathfinder or the fantasy world of Warhammer Fantasy Battle or of Dungeon Crawl Classics or any of, pick your game and you look at it and if you sort of squinted and shook your head, they'd all look like the same world, more or less, if you ignore geopolitical nonsense in between them. But they all have the same broad strokes, what they're drawing from the same well.
Which is what we mean when we say what are the foundational tropes of fantasy and where do they come from.
Yeah. So, excuse me. So when we talk about that, where they come from, that's what we're talking about today. We are talking about Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and a million other books that the man wrote. That most of them got published after he died. He is... If there's something in fantasy that you like, if there's something in fantasy that you like that spreads across the genres, there's a very good chance it wouldn't be as it is without Tolkien.
It's fair.
He built a lot of that stuff.
So it's also fair to say that Tolkien knew that he wasn't creating a new set of legends. He was pulling older legends into a new paradigm.
Yeah, he was, and I actually do have a Tolkien quote here because I'm that kind of
There's
nerd.
a Tolkien quote for everything, so
There
why
is.
not?
So Tolkien said he was asked by a reader a question, and I don't know what it is, but when he's explaining sort of his idea, what his goal was he said, "I am interested in mythological invention and the mystery of literary creation. I was, from early days, grieved by the poverty of my own beloved country. It had no stories of its own, not the quality that I sought and found in the legends of other lands. There was Greek and Celtic, and Romance, Germanic, Scandinavian, and Finnish, but nothing English, save for the impoverished chapbook stuff." And he has a point. English legend is King Arthur, and even then, that's arguably French.
Well, it's actually Roman, but yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the fantasies of Camelot are arguably the most British of all mythological constructs. So,
and that's it. That's what they have. They don't have a pantheon of gods. They don't have a huge bank of verbal history or oral history. They have one story about Camelot, okay, or one set of stories about Camelot.
But I think it's important to note that the reason that England specifically is that way is because England specifically is a very strange melting pot of cultures.
Yeah.
Relative to the rest of Europe, which is mostly people live there, other people come from the east, invade, take over, and kill off everybody else, new culture installed. Whereas in Britain,
Yeah, that's
nobody
accurate.
ever managed to kill off everybody, so the culture sort of melted together.
Yeah, and you do see a little bit of the pulling in from other places, but it doesn't have that very very rich mythological thing that Tolkien was looking for when he wrote
Yeah,
that
yeah,
letter.
it was shallow, and I mean, it was shallow for a variety of reasons. But again, that mixing pot, when you have so much, um, you tend not to go very deep with it.
That's why if you look at what American legends are for like modern America, we have cryptids and we have like Sasquatch and we have
Advertising copy.
advertising copy. We have the Jersey Devil. Like we have that kind of stuff, and then everything else we end up pulling in from what are other cultures. We've co-opted a lot of the Native American myths. We've co-opted myths that immigrants bring in from their countries, but there's still not a whole lot of stuff in America.
I
That's just
mean,
a modern problem.
the Legend of Sleepy Hollow straight up features an Irish legendary figure in the headless mercenary who rides into town
Mhm.
and is not offered hospitality correctly, and therefore takes revenge on Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, but we're getting off track.
Right.
So imagine, we don't have a huge cultural depth of myth in America. Tolkien didn't see that in England either. So he decided he'd make his own. And Lord of the Rings, the mythology of Middle Earth and the Greylands.
Hmm.
Oh, that was embarrassing. The mythology of Middle Earth and the Greylands is what he wanted to build that legend with. Before we go into the exact specifics of that, though, it's probably worth understanding why this stuff is so good, and that's going to come down to Tolkien was a madman. Uh, he
I, I don't think that's fair. I think that Tolkien was a very specific kind of person that may or may not currently exist anymore. He was an avid, beyond just being one of the foremost linguists working at the time, he was also an avid consumer of mythos, mythology, and legendary stories.
My madman comment comes on the idea that every language in Lord of the Rings isn't just I need a word for this, so I put a word in. He wrote these languages. He made actual organic languages, then stopped looking at them and came back to them 10,000 years later to see how they would have evolved, and did some wild stuff, which is why the languages are fabulous. Their alphabets, thank you, Mr. Smithwick, are the golden standard for what Elvish language is supposed to look like today, for what Dwarven language looks like today. It's mainly just ripped straight from Lord of the Rings. That's just what it is. He laid those foundations so hard, everyone else was like, yeah, we'll just take that. That works.
It it, it is a masterwork, and I think it's fair to point out that the Lord of the Rings trilogy was a project that Tolkien undertook for Christopher specifically. Not that he was ignoring his other children, but back in the old days, as a parent, you had to entertain your children, especially at night, when it was dark outside. You didn't want them running around because there was only oil lanterns to light the street. Um, you'd have to tell them stories or play games with them. And Tolkien, being a real professorial sort, chose to probably bore his kids to death by telling them Beowulf 700 times, and then figured out that he needed to tell new and interesting
Yeah.
stories.
So he came up with The Hobbit.
Yeah.
And The Hobbit is sort of the foundational book where, here we go. My little beat up to hell and back version of The Hobbit. It has seen better days. But it's fantastic, and it smells like every place I've read it. The Hobbit is the first book that came out that he wrote for the Lord of the Rings. Fun fact, Tolkien could recite Beowulf in Old English. Brilliant.
Yep.
So The Hobbit it was kind of initially packaged to be its own thing. Lord of the Rings came out afterwards and was an add-on to it. Fun fact, though, The Hobbit, there's sort of two stories of The Hobbit, how it happened. Not going to get too much into it, but if you've seen the Hobbit films, where Bilbo runs or interacts with Smeagol in the cave, and in the films, it's not a good encounter at all. One of them's about to kill the other one, and he just barely he steals the ring and gets out. In the movie, there's a line where Gandalf actually says, "That's not how," or it says something to the effect of, "I'm sure that's what Bilbo told you happened," to indicate that what he did in the movie and in the current printings of The Hobbit, or sorry, the original printings of The Hobbit, were not exactly what they're supposed to be. So the movie is more of an accurate version of what happened. The original printing of The Hobbit was then canonically written as what Bilbo told people happened. So it's, I beat this river monster man by a battle of wits, and he gave me the ring and wished me a happy-go-lucky good do and have a good day. That's not what happened. He fought him and got angry with him. And that came up out of a actual, like a copyright trademark problem. But he's like, we got to just do a second edition then, and it happened. But I've run off. Again, you're supposed to be my guide rails here, Rob.
Yes. The interesting part to that is actually that there are a lot of fun copyright issues because the way that Tolkien's works got to America was that they were underwritten by a separate publishing company from the one that he published with in England, and that publishing company then, subletted the rights to Ace. And if you are an adult of a certain age and we're into science fiction and fantasy, Ace was a prolific penny trade producer, basically the bottom barrel. So they produced a version of The Hobbit that was not necessarily as Tolkien would have liked it, because back then people felt like they could edit other people's work without talking to them.
Yeah, it was a wilder time back then. So he ended up coming out with The Hobbit as we know it today. But the tropes that are built in The Hobbit are met throughout the rest of the trilogy, or the other trilogy, I guess.
Yeah. Almost everything that we see in the broader trilogy is introduced in The Hobbit.
Even if it's just mentioned in passing, he's
right.
very consistent with how he does them. He built a world first, which is something that a great dungeon master is going to do. Is they'll build a world and then figure out how to tell a fun story in it, and he was a master at that. He built his races from the various world myths and legends, like the elves. Everybody knows what an elf is today. The tall, aloof, in touch with nature, in touch with magic, sort of detached from the younger species. Sometimes they live forever, sometimes they only live hundreds of years. Before Tolkien, that was not the generic understanding of elf. There was something all over the world that everybody could identify with as an elf. My favorite is and it's still there, is in Iceland, or the Icelandic elves are basically garden gnomes, fairies. Yep. Like it's not exactly what you would think of. It's not Galadriel.
It's close to the old Celtic take on elves, who were basically nasty little things that came into your house and stole stuff, including your babies if you weren't careful.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap in the variety of different Celtic and just not even Celtic, just folk monsters. A lot of them do the same thing. A lot of them would be an elf, a pixie, a fairy. The gnomes that come in cobble shoes. Those are gnomes, right? I'm not. Is that the?
Yes, gnomes and brownies and I think Gricks. There's a ton. So European mythology is interesting because you have the originating Bohemian myth that was sort of codified as Grimm's, although Grimm's is a bit of a punching up of some very, very horrifying stories.
Yeah.
But those stories moved without the original publication of Grimm's. They moved with the people as they moved throughout Europe. So as those Bohemian people moved to Holland, a version of those stories was told in Holland. So you have slightly different takes, but there's a I guess a common underlying mythology there.
Yeah,
to some extent.
and there's a lot of even beyond that. There's a lot of monsters that appear in some parts of the world, as Tolkien tells them. Trolls, for instance, show up in Norway, I believe, the Finno-Scandia Peninsula.
The Nordic Peninsula, yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to say Finno-Scandia on stream somehow. Someone owes me $1 now. But that peninsula has a weird relationship with giants and trolls, where if they see sunlight, they turn into stone. That's a thing that they believe in their mythic history. Tolkien took that and put that into the trolls that we see in The Hobbit. So there's a lot of stuff in there. Goblins are every culture has a goblin of some flavor, just like every culture has some kind of a dragon monster thing that we all identify as a dragon. We identify the Chinese dragon, the Native American dragon, the Western European dragons. All of these, we know what they are, and we classify them nowadays as a dragon. But the drake, dragon, worm, wyvern, whatever it is you want to sort of codify that sort of became what we know it as today with Smaug. It's like, hey, it's the guy who sits on gold and has 4 legs and big wings and breathes fire at everybody. Boom, dragon codified.
Right, and Smaug is probably a fair originator for modern dragon mythologies, but the interesting thing about fantasy tropes and the fact that many of them did originate with Tolkien is that we've had 70 years to I guess hammer away at the metal a little bit more. So you have modern takes on dragons that are very distant from Smaug and much closer in some cases to the mythos of dragons in earlier European tales.
Yeah, you get a lot of that. You get a lot of like the Dungeons and dragons where they're able to cast spells and they're wise beings and they live forever, maybe. That's a really cool thing that didn't quite exist with Tolkien. He looked at the sources that went back to, and he's like, no, we're going to go with Smaug and say that's what a dragon is. Mm-hmm. But other sources that he pulled from, like everybody should be familiar with the Ring of the Nibelung. If not, you know what it is when you hear like Ride of the Valkyries, because you've watched Bugs Bunny.
I mean, so if you have never actually, this is opera, to be clear. We're talking about opera.
But there are also stories of, which
the Ring Cycle.
Yeah, yes. The Ring Cycle.
But if you have never at all perused the Ring Cycle, you should, if only because it introduces several characters that inform so many of the modern tropes of fantasy tabletop, including everybody's favorite bard.
Bugs Bunny?
Not Bugs Bunny, sorry. No, pleasing.
I tried. Sound off in the chat if you think Bugs Bunny's better.
But this is one of the things that Tolkien did, and he did it in a way that felt organic, which is probably because he did what Max did. He sat down and built a world first, a complete world with a history, languages. So there was no question in Tolkien's mind what the motivations of every character, whether they be human, humanoid, or monstrous spider creature, was going to be in his stories.
Yeah, one of the things that he did, it wasn't just that he built the world as it is, he built it from creation. He had, good lord, Papa Ayur came out and was like, you know what, I'm bored, I'm gonna make a whole bunch of angels to sing songs with me. And he's like, I'm still bored, let's make a planet. And that planet became Middle-earth and the Grey Havens. The Undying Lands. Good lord, man, I am off on this today. I'm sorry, guys.
It's okay.
So Middle-earth and the Undying Lands was the world that he created. And then all of his angel minions went out and made things. And because the elves are so tied into the song of creation, they don't care. They're long-lived. They're immortal beings. So that's why they get the current trope of them being pompous and old and not caring about anybody else and good with magic. because back then they were literally made of magic. They were tied to the magical world. And hobbits weren't. So hobbits are just men, but shorter, maybe. He doesn't actually talk about where hobbits come from.
They're sort of I guess an idealized in a way, but also a literally but also metaphorically diminutized British countryside folk.
Yeah, they are British humans, is what they're supposed to be, and humans are not. Humans are not the heroes of the story. If you've read the books, you know that. But
they're also not the villains of the story. So
they try to be good.
It's complicated.
But the hobbits are related to men, and that's more or less all we know about them, which is kind of weird because there's thousands of pages if we count the Silmarillion, the books, or the Silmarillion, all 4 books, and the millions of pages he made after that were published after he died. You know,
it needs to be made clear that hobbits, are sort of whole cloth creation of Tolkien's, which
kind of,
the idea that they're related to humans is alluded to in Arneson and Gygax's naming of the non-copyright infringing race halflings.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Halfling is a term that's been around in English for a long time, and it means short people. I mean, it's used differently in different languages, which is why D&D halflings are called that, and not called hobbits, because one of those is copyrighted. But the D&D halflings are Tolkien hobbits. That's what they are. Because otherwise they could have been anything. They could have been small impish people. They could have been, just regular people, but midgets. But the love of food, love of fun, the love of being homebodies, and adventurers being the not norm comes from Tolkien. That's exactly what they are, and somehow they didn't lose the lawsuit.
I mean, to be fair, there's enough space between them conceptually that you'd have a hard time arguing that they're supposed to be the same thing. I mean, hobbits really don't want to be adventurers. They don't want anything to do with that lifestyle. Whereas halflings in the role-playing games kind of do. They're generally interested in shenanigans.
That is true. Shenanigans are my favorite part of halfling lore. So
yeah. But let's circle back to elves, because the Tolkien elves have become so central to how elves are viewed in modern fantasy games, and that is the one weird, oddly implacable part of broader fantasy tropes is all elves are Tolkien-esque to some level.
Yeah, that's an odd one. If anybody out there in the chat, just so we can get some more engagement, I guess, anybody out there in the chat can think of an elf in a major fantasy setting that is not the tropic Tolkien elf, let us know, because I've been racking my brain on it. I really can't think of one.
I'm going to jump out here and say that the one that is, to my mind, the furthest away, but is still
you can still see it,
sort of leaning on the debt of Tolkien, are the Gloranthan elves.
Which one of those?
Glorantha.
I've never heard of that.
So Glorantha is old. The first Glorantha setting guide came out, I think, for AD&D. It's distant. So Gloranthan elves are more reliant on Native American mythology than they are the European mythos that Tolkien was drawing on. The elves in Glorantha are cursed people in that they have to follow a series of taboos in order to maintain their immortality. Otherwise, they have the same lifespan as a human.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So,
and we do have an answer. The Dark Crystal. Are Gelflings elves?
Gelflings, I guess, are they are elves. They don't have a large debt to Tolkien.
Yeah, that works. They're almost if I'm remembering right, they're more like the I think they're more like the cultural European elves than they are the actual Tolkien elves. So yeah, good call there.
That's correct, because the Gelflings do have the Lewis-Alfar and the Svart-Alfar divide down, and that was one of the weirdest parts of the Dark Crystal as a kid.
Yeah, so that's what do we got? You're not wrong. The elves. Yeah, that's very fair. Good call there. Anything else you guys can think of? Because I'm sure there's something out there that's labeled as an elf, but is pulling from the cultural myths of other other cultures in Europe or around the world. But for the most part, the D&D elves are Tolkien elves. I'm pretty sure the original the original elves for the white box were just as tall as, were also tall beings. As I'm stalling because I'm pulling up my white box.
Elf heights have varied a bit. I think the elves got shortened for AD&D in order to avoid copyright problems.
Yeah, I don't have the AD. Well, I do have the. No, I don't have the player's handbook. Damn it! All right, well.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to get me a gift.
It's neither here nor there, I suppose, because AD&D humans were way taller than the average human at the time. So.
Okay. So we kind of show what we're talking about though, like all of the standard high elf is kind of a thing, and that owes itself to Tolkien there. Same thing with orcs. He straight up made up orcs. As they exist, they are sort of a mash of a couple other things, but I'm honestly shocked that orcs as they're portrayed are not being they're not being sued like Hobbit was.
So that's actually an interesting, I guess, copyright problem, because the word orc pre-existed the orc.
Yeah.
And the word orc describes the orc in the sense that they are supposed to be monstrous others that are threatening the stability of the society. Or, if you are a High German in the Lower Palatinate Rhine in the 1450s, a Bohemian.
You learn something new every day. So we have Mark CMG saying The Broken Sword by Paul Anderson. Okay, yeah. No, that fits. That's good.
I love Paul Anderson's works, by the way. But the interesting thing about Paul Anderson's works is that Paul Anderson is working not in the same time as Tolkien, but he is in the very, very first wave of authors that are being influenced by Tolkien. And he is an academic, and he goes back and he looks at the mythology that Tolkien is drawing on, and he actually writes the first isekai adventure, which is, it's weird to me that the trope is named isekai, because the Stranger in a Strange Land thing is actually way older than an isekai. But the idea of being modern man dropped into a setting of high medieval society, I guess.
Well, even then, like that was a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court. That was what that was.
Right, but I mean like modern fantasy isekai.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court is 100% isekai, but it's also not the original one, because the original one is 9,000 plus years old. Because we definitely didn't create the idea of being a person drawn into a different world and having to deal with that. It's a very old story.
Yeah, we get all the Edgar Rice Burroughs and Princess of Mars stuff, and it's a good story. It's common.
Yep.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. The whole isekai thing is, that works there too. But with the, some of the other stuff that got sort of pulled in and sort of cut whole cloth from Tolkien is the idea of kind of, I just completely blanked on this and my show notes are empty. So if you look at it with the idea of the ring itself, the indestructible magical item that's there's a lot of that kind of thing that gets pulled up in other mythologies. But the idea that there's this one thing that can give any of its people, anybody who uses it, this kind of maybe power, maybe not. That trope of there's this evil thing you need to destroy is now a staple in literature, in role-playing games.
Right. The literal but also
MacGuffin.
metaphorical MacGuffin.
Yeah.
But I mean, beyond that, it's also created a whole nother stable trope, which is the Ring of Invisibility.
Yeah, I don't remember what the Rings of the Nebelung did, because I know they granted something. I think it was just blessings, vague blessings.
It was vigor, wink, wink. Strength, puissance, skill at swordplay, and I can't remember the rest. But they were all things that in the time that the works that Wagner was working off of
I'm sorry, what did you
would have
say his
been
name
things. Puissance?
No, Wagner?
Yeah, Wagner.
Sure, man, it's Wagner.
Yeah, okay. Wagner. Are you happy now?
Almost never.
He was the myths that he was working off of. Those were the things that you, as a man of adventure, would want.
Wow, Mark CMG is pulling up the the hardcore ones. We have Enkidu,
Yeah.
Gilgamesh's friend. You need to hang around more, Mark. I feel like we need to talk to you because Gilgamesh is not a reference I was expecting to see.
At some point, we'll have a huge, long conversation about Sumerian mythology and how awesome it is. But yes, 100% Enkidu is a stranger in a strange land, and that is probably the origin of the story trope in written form.
Yeah, you don't get a whole lot more early writing than ancient Sumerian. So
Yes, than Gilgamesh. Yeah.
Yeah, so that works out really well. So what are some of the other things that you think that viewers should be aware of when they're playing in Dungeons and Dragons?
So I think that the one thing that hasn't translated in modern fantasy that Tolkien had as a very important piece in his stories was the idea of the wizard as an individual who did very little to accomplish a whole lot.
Yeah, that's this is a point of confusion for a lot of people. Not necessarily like they don't understand it, but just they don't grasp it. Merlin fits into this category very, very well, actually.
Right. Merlin is the quintessential example of this in modern mythology. Anyway, Merlin is a relatively recent myth, based on a much older myth.
Yeah.
But the modernized version of Merlin does almost nothing.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful in a way. The idea that the true power of a wizard is his ability to make people listen to him is great.
And where I was getting on is, depending on which myth of Merlin you're going with, Merlin's not a man. Merlin is something else from another place, and he didn't get his power through study. He got his power through being a wizard.
Celtic mythology is very interesting and complex. In some versions of the story, Merlin is a fairy, but not a fairy in the tiny little floating thing perspective, but a fairy in the human-sized, human-ish looking monster. But in others, he's a man who studies magic with a fairy. And in others, he's a he is an ascended animal.
Yes. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff out there. Mark is saying in the chat that Merlin's character originated in Welsh folklore. Mm-hmm. Maybe. It's a very, very big character.
This comes back to what is modern Merlin, and yes, modern Merlin's character originated in the Welsh folklore. The fun thing about Welsh folklore is that
no one can pronounce
it's actually really well documented.
All right. Oh, so, it looks like we're getting Reed actually trying to get us back on track. So, thank you so much. So yeah, Gandalf is not a human. Gandalf is not a man who studied wizardry. As far as we know, there is no capability for. There's no proof that humans can learn to do magic in Middle Earth.
Actually, there's no proof that humans can work magic at all in Middle Earth.
There is evidence,
That's
but it's all
right.
rumor. So we'll get to it in a second.
Hmm.
So Merlin, or not Merlin, yeah, Merlin. Gandalf is a Valar. It's a Valar or Maiar? I can't remember that one. Maiar?
He is Maiar.
He's Maiar. No, you're Mark. You're on, man. I'm loving it. So Gandalf is Maiar, which is basically a low to mid tier angel. If you're just breaking it down, the same powers, or the same celestial thing. He was created by a god to do a thing. And there's a whole bunch of other wizards too. There's Saruman the White.
This is interesting because Tolkien, very devout Catholic, sort of disagreed with the Catholic take on angels. The Maiar had free will.
Mm-hmm.
They had tasks, they had jobs to do, but they were free to go about those jobs as they saw fit, which is not true of angels. Angels are robots, basically, that go out and do the job and then return.
And terrifying. Like, let's be fair, Catholic angels are terrifying monsters. They're not the person with the robes and the wings. No, they're like a flaming
They
burning...
can appear as those people, yes. But they're not those.
Yeah, they can, but more often than not, they'll be like the flaming wheel of eyes. What is that? So hence the, be not afraid. Anyway, so Gandalf is an angel. Saruman the White is also an angel, because then they had tiers by color and stuff. Radagast the Brown is an angel. And then there's the two blue wizards, which we don't really know a whole lot about, but they disappeared off into the east. That's all we know. And maybe to cause schools.
They rallied the men of the south to Gondor, and then they disappeared.
Yeah. By the time that Lord of the Rings happens, they've sort of just kicked off like, we're going to go over there. Maybe we're going to start cults or schools of magic. Who knows? Elves can work magic because they are deeply in tune with the song of creation. They are... Yep.
We need to talk about what do we mean when we say work magic versus use magic. When we say work magic, we mean the ability to either create spells or create magical objects or instill magic into something.
Yeah, well, I think one of the best examples of this, and I'm going to go off the movie just because everybody knows it, when the elf, I can't remember her name, is riding across the river with Frodo after he's been stabbed at Weathertop, and the ring wraiths are behind him, behind the two of them, and she turns at the end of the river and calls an incantation that has the giant watery steeds come and knock away the ring wraiths. Humans can't do that. Elves didn't create that magic. That magic was there, and they heard it and can channel it. But they can't create spells and make new magic happen. That's kind of the big difference. Whereas Gandalf can be like, oh, here's how I understand how magic works. I'm going to make this thing do this thing that it can't normally do.
Yeah. Reed jumping in to point out that the two blue wizards possibly died in Umbar, which is a whole big side of Middle Earth that is awkward to talk about.
Yeah, the Pirates of Umbar are not easy.
Yeah.
But I would be willing to doubt that they died or permanently died, just because again they are reincarnatable angels, and
right. As long as Alu Ilvatar has a job for them, theoretically they can
yes.
come back as many times as possible.
That said, maybe if they get if they went and got lost and decided to do something that wasn't the job, they did get punished by Aegon. Like, no, we're done. Get back in the sack of magic stuff.
Off you go to the Undying Lands, have fun, or don't. I don't care.
That's a solid Aegon Libertar there.
Yeah.
Solid reps. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool magical stuff in there. If we're going by Tolkien wizardry, Harry Potter's not a wizard. He's actually no, he would be because he studied it. I'm thinking the D&D wizardry. If we go off Tolkien wizardry, Adgern Firebeard, the dwarf who read magic, is not a wizard. He would be something different, probably not even possible. But the sorcerers would be closer to Tolkien wizards.
Arguably, the idea that the dwarves could infuse runes with magic is present in Tolkien's notes.
It is, and that's how you get things like the entrance to the Mines of Moria.
Right.
But for the most part, dwarves don't really have an ability or a desire to impact the world in a meaningful sense. They are kind of automaton little robots that do their task.
Dwarves are interesting because they don't tap into the song when they do rune magic. Rune magic is sort of twisting the song of creation.
Yeah, a little bit. Later, Mark. Thanks for coming in. But there's a if you look at the history of the rings, they were tried to use them on the dwarves when real crash course on Lord of the Rings. Sauron is sort of a level below who is Melkor's assistant. Melkor being an evil angel, and he was created by Melkor to do things and help conquer the world. He's known as a necromancer.
Sauron is the equivalent of the Maiar in bad side.
Yeah, he's basically evil Gandalf.
Yeah.
So that's why he can do all this magical stuff. But for a while, he walked the world trying to figure out how to take it over. He came up with a plan to make rings, went to the elves, tried to get them to make them, and the elves were like, oh, really cool, we have fancy rings. Put them on, and like, oh, that doesn't work. Take them off before his spell could work on them. So then he took them to the dwarves, and his magic rings just didn't work on the dwarves as a mind control thing because dwarves are dwarves. They want to dig and find riches. That's all they care about. Then he gave it to the humans, and the humans became his delightful servants in the sense of the ring wraiths. Basically the rings extend or give you the thing that you want the most of. For humans, it was their lives, because they die after 50 to 80 years, and they wanted to live longer. So they lived forever until they faded into nothingness. The dwarves value riches, so they they made them dig and find more riches until they woke up a Balrog. That's not fun.
Well, I mean, it kind of is if your name is Gandalf.
Yeah, Balrogs. They are also a wizard. So if you're wondering how Gandalf can fight this crazy old man with a staff and a sword can fight that giant winged, maybe demon flaming monster thing, it's because they're both about the same level. Oh, another cat.
The fun thing is that there's obvious nods to the greater Christian mythos, and again, Tolkien devout, but also sort of not in 100% agreement with the prescriptions of his church at the time, and an actual scholar, and therefore learned things like Zoroastrianism. A lot of the mythology that he constructed is loosely based on interpretations of Zoroastrianism that were available in Britain, when he was alive.
Yeah, he was a very, very intelligent and well-read man. He knew what he was doing, and he didn't make things up on the fly without knowing how they would work, how it's been done before, and take that kind of thing. Like, I have an entire book that's just things that he was inspired by that built The Lord of the Rings. I'm still reading it because it's a ridiculously thick tome. So there is a lot of great stuff that he didn't just make it all up. He knew how legends are supposed to work. Because again, according to that quote I was reading, he wanted to build a myth, a legend for England, and have those wild, adventurous stories that the other cultures had. And he studied those. He figured out how they worked.
And here we are, 70 years later, still having fun with the pieces that he had put together for us. I do want to point out that there's a lot of interesting and weird, and the book that Mac is reading right now gets into this. Like, Tolkien knew 17, 18 different sets of mythology, including some Eastern mythology, and I mean more Eastern than Iran. He was a very, 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 very well-read scholar on the occult and mythology, and he was a man who understood how you write a story, because he was a man who broke down stories for a living.
Yeah, and there's you have to be a really good storyteller to do that kind of thing, or you just become it by learning by reading that. He did a lot of really great stuff on that front. One of the things, probably the coolest book I've ever seen, one of, because I've seen a lot of really cool books, was when I was down at Texas A&M. They had on loan from somewhere, they had an original manuscript written in his own hand of one of the Lord of the Rings books. I believe it was Two Towers. It could have been Fellowship of the Ring. That he had that J.R.R. Tolkien sent to C.S. Lewis to read over and look at it and give him notes. So the manuscript itself was huge. It was probably, I don't know, it was probably twice as big as a normal sized book. And then there were wide margins on there. And in the margins, you could see C.S. Lewis's handwriting saying, "That's a stupid idea," or "Why would you do that?" or "I like this." And the two of them were good friends, and they bickered a little bit like that. But the handwriting of Tolkien is the script of the elves. Insane that he could do that. He hand wrote out all of his manuscripts, and then when he had to get them published, he actually sat there at a typewriter and typed like your grandmother, one letter at a time, getting that in, because he didn't know how to type. He just did everything by hand, and it's kind of wild. If you look at, I think Christopher Tolkien had published a lot of his stuff since, after he died, and it was all handwritten notes. And the fact that he could read them is amazing.
Well, I mean, they're very legible relative to modern handwriting.
Very true, yeah. So if you haven't had an opportunity to look at them, I highly recommend trying to find some scripts of, or pictures of his original handwriting, because it's beautiful stuff.
Yeah, all around fascinating guy in terms of who he was. But I mean, that friendship between C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, once you understand that friendship exists, you can start to see how C.S. Lewis built the Chronicles of Narnia, and J.R. Tolkien built what became the Fellowship trilogy.
Yeah, it's the two of them did collaborate a bit and did some cool stuff. One of my favorite bits of Tolkien trivia, I guess, is that Christopher Lee, he played Saruman in the Lord of the Rings movies, actually met Tolkien. Like, he's the only cast member who knew Tolkien, and they, that's a really cool thing. I think that they worked together in the war at one point.
Yeah, Christopher Lee was a Royal Air Force intelligence officer, and he worked early in the war. He worked for what would become the Ministry of Propaganda, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And Tolkien was also working for them, because Tolkien spoke
every
27 languages.
Yeah, and so that's really cool that the two of them worked on that. And yeah, Mr. Smithwick is absolutely right. He thought he should be playing Gandalf, and he told Ian McKellen, but it worked out.
I don't think Ian McKellen takes anything personally when it comes to acting. I just it doesn't, except when you deprive him of people to be around. He takes that very personally.
Yeah, he doesn't like the green screen stuff, which I can understand that. But yeah, so the actions that Tolkien and Lee did in the war, they're cool. They're really interesting guys. I think it was the something of Ungentlemanly Warfare.
The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare.
Yeah, there we go.
Right. Formerly Ministry of Propaganda became the weird stuff. Tolkien, by the way, was a World War I veteran, and not an average World War I veteran. He was a World War I long trench campaign veteran.
Yeah. So all of that, I've seen some theories on where he came up with a lot of his ideas about the Lord of the Rings, and some of it is he thought about it as a way to talk about things that happened in the war. I don't really buy some of that, because yes, there is some bad stuff that happens there. The analogs are more celebrating things that aren't that. maybe if you want to look at Isengard and describe that as the war front in itself, I could see that argument a little bit. But I've seen, like whole, not dissertations, but whole writings saying, oh, the movement of the ring in Fellowship causes, follows parallels of World War One. It's like, it doesn't though. You're stretching really hard there.
I just tend to believe that it's very hard to not write your own experience. And by the same token, if there was one person that was capable of not writing their own experience,
it would be
was
him.
Probably Tolkien. Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody out there, we've been sort of rambling about Tolkien and chatting about some of our favorite things on it. Please shout out some of your cool things in the chat, things that you think are really awesome about that we still have in modern Dungeons and Dragons and modern fantasy, or that you wish we had from Tolkien in modern fantasy. And if you're a DM, you can make that happen yourself. But just in the standard source books, what in there is something that you feel is great from there, or something that you think we should be adding in, or should be trying to snap back to how it was? I feel like I'm making that clear, right, Rob?
Right. Yeah. Where have we strayed, and whether or not we should have strayed.
Yeah, and I don't think I would want to play a fantasy game in Middle Earth. I just
really.
I don't think so. No. I'm glad it exists, but I'd rather go somewhere where you have more agency on the story if you're not a human or a hobbit, because those are the only two that could do it.
So there's a very interesting approach to role-playing games set in Middle Earth, which is generally that they tend to avoid the entire period of conflict.
Yeah, I absolutely wouldn't want to play in the War of the Ring. That just doesn't. Right. No agency there at all. But what I meant by that is, if you're not a human or you're not a hobbit, you don't care about trying to change things. Dwarves don't care about trying to change things. Elves don't care about trying to change things. Ents don't care.
The interesting thing, so what Middle Earth is now is not at all. I shouldn't say that. It's not directly what Tolkien had visioned when he built Middle Earth originally. It has developed a bit.
Yes.
One Ring is the current modern, and I use that phrase loosely, incarnation of Middle Earth role playing, which by the way exists.
I know people who really enjoy it.
Is very, very old at this point. But the One Ring sets it up basically by pushing the timeline back a little bit, so that you have elves that are interested in doing things, and you have dwarves that are out in the world, usually for reasons that are 100% dwarf, like looking for treasure. Like that's literally one of the primary motivations for dwarf characters, is they're looking for treasure.
That hasn't changed. Just gonna put that out.
Right.
Yeah.
But they have hobbits, and hobbits actually are probably one of the least played races in the One Ring, because hobbits have a very, very narrow skill set.
Can you play an Ent and take a nap is what I'm curious about, Mr. Smithwick.
I don't think they have playable Ents.
I wouldn't want one either. Your conversation just takes so long.
But there's 3 playable types of men, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think you can play Dunedain, and Black Men, and they all have slightly different rules.
Yeah. Take a nap, that is playing a nap. Absolutely, I would take a nap and be like, all right, I'm going to go over there.
I'm a method role player.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's if you're interested in that, there's a lot of ways to get your kicks for bringing role play and just playing various things in the Lord of the Rings universe online, or to life. I think that there is a Lord of the Rings online somewhere.
There is indeed an MMO, and I have really nothing to say about that.
No, I think I've looked at it for 5 minutes. I'm like, all right, that's cool. I'm gonna not play that. But there's a lot of other opportunities to play stuff with it, because it is a really cool universe. It's just I don't think it'd be my cup of tea to play as a single hero. There's a couple battle games where you can do a whole bunch of stuff. Remember those old Xbox games, and those were awesome. Yeah, those came out with the movies, weren't they? They were sort of like, hey, play through the story of
Battle for Middle Earth.
Yeah, Battle for Middle Earth. That's it.
Yep. Yeah, I actually have played through both of the Shadow of Mordor games, not because I am a Tolkien nerd, but because I am a stealth game nerd, and
And you hate orcs?
I don't hate the. Well, obviously I hate orcs, but I don't hate the games. So they're
I've heard good things about them. Yeah.
they're fun for what they are, which is not at all. Please don't make the mistake of thinking that they're canon material. They're not. But if you just want to have a fun romp in the War of the Rings precursor conflicts, yeah, Celebrimbor. You play a man, I guess, possessed by Celebrimbor,
That's
the
fun.
forger of the rings.
Yeah. Well, no, you're not playing the elf though. I thought you were playing the dead guy that he inhabits. Oh no, I guess you are playing the elf. Oh damn it! Never mind. I can't play that.
It's a bit of both. Uh, the you play a dead ranger, and the dead ranger does still have free will. He does still have the ability to make decisions, but he is being possessed by Celebrimbor, who is a functionally stronger spirit than he is, and Celebrimbor can take over, and does when he needs to do magical things.
Ah, I see. All right. I mean, Celebrimbor is a cool elf, so I'll give it to you.
He's actually a ranger of the Black Gate, not Gondor.
You calling out people in the chat?
Yeah.
Well, I think that is there anything else you want to go out on this? I feel like we've kind of, I mean, we haven't exhausted it, but we'll need to do more prep before we're going to do another 45 minutes or an hour of chatting about it.
Um, I, I think we've hit everything that we actually wanted to hit, which is impressive.
That's,
I need to be clear, guys. We can go so far down this rabbit hole. We can talk about the pathos of I talked about Losofar and Svartalfar, light elves and dark elves, literally white elves and black elves when you translate it, and the fact that modern fantasy roleplay has taken that concept of Svartalfar and Losofar and sort of done something different than what Tolkien ended up doing with it.
Yeah, because the dark elves in Tolkien's weren't really a different race so much as different class.
They were just elves that did grungy things.
Yeah.
So in modern fantasy we have a completely different take on dark elves, where they're also functionally horrible beings. It's obviously it's in flux because there's a whole reassessment of how we approach these things.
Yeah.
But the one thing that has never made any sense to me is why they have dark skin when they live underground. It doesn't make any sense.
That is confusing. Yeah.
And by the way, in the original mythology, they don't have dark skin. They're called black elves because they work the forges, not because they have dark skin. And they have dark hair because it's covered in soot.
Yeah. All right. I think that actually covers it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. I did get a little rambly in the second half there, but that's what happens.
That's what happens when you ask us to talk about mythology, or we allow ourselves to, I guess.
Yeah. I'm gonna pretend that somebody asked us to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you again so much for tuning in. We have a whole bunch of other shows coming up this week. Tomorrow, I believe Mr. Smithwick, Corey's going to be running I believe it's Barber of Silvery Moon is what he's going to be pushing out there. So that should be fun. There's a bunch of us that are going to be playing in it, and I'm excited to get that going. It's happening tomorrow and next week. So it's going to be a two-parter, so it should be fun. And then Velkin Weave is out on vacation, I believe is the term.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then on Thursday, we're doing Whiskey, Magic, and Destruction, where we're going to continue delving mines and trying to get to the Underdark and stuff. So I'm really excited to see this.
It sounds like we're going deep.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a very interesting. Well, it's going to be less interesting now that we've properly equipped our humans, but it's still going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah. So that both of those are going to be happening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard or Eastern Daylight Time, because that's what we're in. And we will see you guys then. Please check out our social media at Twitter. We have a LinkedIn social media, both, or not LinkedIn. What is that? It's Instagram. So we have Twitter and Instagram. Check us out there at The Games Tavern. We also have on Facebook The Games Tavern. Check us out there, and also the Patreon The Games Tavern. All of these are available there, and of course we have our own Discord channel where you can jump in, have a good conversation with us. Excuse me. At any time, check out our Discord there. It's a great community that's hanging out and enjoying chatting with us, talking to each other, and trying to actually. There's a few games that are running now. I'm running one. A couple people are running. I think there's 2 Strahd games, maybe 1 Strahd game going.
There's at least a half a dozen games running right now.
Yeah, so if you're looking for a game, there's probably one there for you.
Yep. We absolutely welcome you to come in. Please talk to us. We're not lonely per se. But
we like hearing from
from
the audience.
The more opportunity you give us to talk, the more stupid things we're going to say. So that's fun for everyone.
All right, so everybody, we're going to go ahead and sign off here. Let everybody have get on with the rest of their evening. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you guys tomorrow night for the Barber of Silvery Moon. All right, everyone have a good night.